Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's update on Winter Storm Olive. So, Winter Storm Olive is already bringing widespread heavy snow to much of the northern Rockies, moderate snow to the northern plains and Minnesota, and moderate to heavy snow across areas of Washington State and Oregon as of 7 p.m. Central Standard Time this evening. And going into the overnight, the snow is going to spread south across the northern into the central Rockies, into the northern and even central plains now, into Minnesota and Wisconsin, with snow spreading into areas like Seattle and Portland by Wednesday morning. The snow is really going to ramp up big time as we go into Wednesday morning across the four corners: Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, and this is when the ice storm is going to start to materialize across from Nebraska through Iowa, through southern Wisconsin and southern Michigan into Pennsylvania by Wednesday afternoon. Freezing rain and sleet are going to be falling all across the Great Lakes in the Northeast, with snow continuing along the western coast and light to moderate snow across the Rockies and into parts of the northern plains. By Wednesday afternoon, we're going to be seeing a very strong low pressure develop across Missouri, and this is going to start to bring blizzard conditions to South Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Wisconsin by Wednesday afternoon. Going into Wednesday evening, the snow and ice are going to continue all across the Great Lakes states into the Northeast, with very heavy snow continuing across the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Minnesota into Wednesday night. Into Thursday morning, we're going to get a secondary low pressure move across Iowa and Illinois, bringing even more heavy snow, very strong winds, and blizzard conditions to Iowa, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin on Thursday morning. And then the ice is going to continue across areas like Wisconsin, Michigan, into New York State, with snow in the Northeast on Thursday morning. And then we're going to get another round of heavy snow across the Northeast as we go into Thursday night and early Friday morning before the storm moves out by Friday afternoon. Now, taking a look at the latest snowfall accumulations, we're going to start with the North American model here. And in this model, we're going to focus on snow totals across the northern plains, as we're going to be seeing widespread 6 inches to 2 feet across many areas in the west and the valley, and in the mountains about 2 to 4 feet. But focusing in on the northern plains, we're going to be seeing widespread 1 foot to 2 feet of snow across South Dakota, southern North Dakota, across central southern Minnesota, including Minneapolis in the North American model. Widespread 1.5 foot to 2 feet, with isolated areas getting possibly 2.5 feet as well. And this is going to be true for much of Wisconsin into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan as well. And then the Northeast is going to see about 6 inches to 1.5 feet across upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine from Winter Storm Olive. Now, looking at another model, looking at the latest GFS for snowfall accumulations, these have actually slightly downtrended, but still, this is going to be a lot of snow, as the GFS is putting a widespread swath of 1 to 2 feet from Wyoming through South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Looking at the European model, the European model is putting about 1.5 foot to 2 feet across these areas as well. And then looking at the Canadian model finally, the GEM GDPS. This model is also showing widespread 1 to 2 feet of snow across North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota and Wisconsin. So make sure you are preparing now for extreme amounts of snow if you live across South Dakota, Minneapolis, St. Paul, South Central Minnesota, Rochester into Eau Claire, and Green Bay and surrounding areas. Now we're going to start taking a look at ice accumulations now, as the ice storm is going to start tomorrow. So taking a look at freezing rain accumulations in the North American model. The North American model is putting widespread ice accumulations across the Midwest and the Great Lakes of between a quarter of an inch to 1 inch. So if these totals verify, and I do think these are a little high, we're going to be seeing major problems with power outages and trees falling down across uh, far southeast Wisconsin, northern Illinois, far central southern Michigan, especially central southern Michigan. I believe you are going to see the worst of this ice storm, and then even into areas of Pennsylvania and New York State. Widespread areas of a quarter to half an inch are going to be occurring with this storm. So make sure you are preparing now for power outages on a large scale. Looking at the GFS model for ice accumulations, the GFS model, oh man, the GFS is showing the same thing as the uh, North American. So this is not good, as we're seeing model agreement of widespread. These models are going crazy, going over an inch to inch and a half. We got 2 inches of freezing rain. I'm not buying that, but make sure you prepare for a quarter to a half an inch of ice if you live in these bright pink and especially yellow areas. I think South Central Michigan, some of these areas are going to see up to 3/4 of an inch of ice. So a very devastating ice storm is about to occur across South Central Michigan, likely including Detroit. Chicago could get in on the ice as well. Looking at the NAM-NEST model, we got some high resolution models I can show you. The NAM-NEST is showing widespread ice accumulations of a quarter to half an inch across portions of Iowa, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and Michigan, between a half an inch and 1 inch. And then finally looking at the HRRR model. Once again, the HRRR is showing the lowest ice totals of all the models, but even the most conservative model is bringing a quarter or a tenth to a quarter of an inch across parts of Iowa, southern Wisconsin, as well as northern Illinois, and across Michigan. The HRRR model is putting widespread ice accumulations of a third of an inch to half an inch. So this is going to be a devastating ice storm across portions of Wisconsin, northern Iowa, especially central southern Michigan. So make sure you're preparing now for large-scale power outages and falling trees. And finally, quick severe weather update for tomorrow. We have a slight risk of severe weather now, extending across central northeast Oklahoma, far southeast Kansas, far northwest Arkansas, much of Missouri, into southwestern Illinois in the yellow, with a marginal risk in the dark green surrounding that. We have a 2% tornado risk within 25 miles of location for this green shaded area from Wichita Falls through Oklahoma City, through Springfield, up through Hannibal. And then the damaging wind threat is at 15% in the yellow and a 5% chance in the brown. And the hail threat is at 5%. And before I close the video, we got blizzard warnings across southeastern North Dakota, much of the eastern half of South Dakota, western, south central Minnesota, getting near Minneapolis. Blizzard warnings near Minneapolis now, as well as central and southern Wyoming. Widespread winter storm warnings in the pinks across Wisconsin, Michigan, the rest of Minnesota, northern Iowa, much of South Dakota, northern Nebraska, Wyoming, much of Montana, Utah, Nevada, into western Oregon, parts of California, the Mogollon Rim of Arizona, northern New Mexico, western Colorado, all on winter storm warnings. We have winter weather advisories in many areas in the purples, winter storm watches in parts of the Northeast and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan now. And this storm system is going to be a huge wind producer. We have wind advisories and high wind warnings and watches all across the Southwest into West Texas, as well as red flag warnings, fire weather warnings, and then wind advisories across the South and the Tennessee Valley. So Winter Storm Olive is going to be a very widespread, dangerous storm for many, producing massive quantities of snow, very strong winds, and ice storms for many people, tens of millions of people. So make sure you are preparing for this storm if you live in the impacted areas. Stay safe and have a wonderful evening, my friends.